Well, next on the show, Remembrance Day is 1 week from tomorrow. And as I mentioned, First Nations veterans did gather in Winnipeg over the weekend. The Southern Chiefs Organization hosted their third annual First Nations Veterans Summit, celebrating, honoring, and supporting veterans from First Nations. CBC's Gavin Axelrod was there and caught up with Joseph Maud, who served for 6 years with the Canadian Armed Forces.
What does it mean to you to be a First Nations veteran?
It means a lot to me. Like I've had other older cousins join in the military. Two first cousins that did 25 years in. So I just had that inner feeling or whatever to serve, and that's what I did. Indigenous
Veterans Day is not too far away. What does that day mean for folks who have served that are Indigenous, do you think?
Oh, it's awesome. I've known about this for a while now, and I always participate, whether I'm at home or here. We want, and I want, our neighbors, our non-Indigenous neighbors, to come and support us. It's all about freedom and serving.
Canadian Armed Forces recently issued an apology for some of the discrimination that members faced. What did you make of that apology?
So I only learned of it today. It's a start towards reconciliation. I'll just say it's a start. I'm invited to other meetings and to talk about reconciliation. I believe that veterans such as myself are part of the solution in offering ideas for reconciliation. I was told by my superiors, if there's somebody gain the ranks, punch them out. Like, that was encouraged. That has to change. How does that make you a better soldier? Really, how does that make you a better soldier? So hopefully that kind of stuff, it doesn't belong in the military. It does not belong in the military. So that's one thing about this reconciliation. Hopefully others speak out of it. They gotta listen to us now, rather when I was in, and it fell on deaf ears. Like I said, I brought up discrimination when I was in, but it was just swept under the rug. But now it's wide open, and somebody that's joining today, an Indigenous person, man or woman, should be be treated equally, and not like being harassed or whatever because that he or she is Indigenous. They're equal. That person could perform equally as the next person.
Quite a statement there from Joseph Maud describing what it was like when he served back in the day, saying there, if somebody was gay, punch them out, sharing what it was like. Also, I don't know if younger generations can really wrap their heads around the fact that may not have been that unusual, which is, of course, the point in remembering all kinds of forms of discrimination. Joseph Maud served 6 years, as I mentioned, in the forces, in conversation with Gavin Axelrod over the weekend. Now, Gavin also spoke with Justin Woodcock, the First Nations Veterans Program Manager with Southern Chiefs Organization that put on this summit. He served for 8 years with the forces.
This year's theme is Look How Far We've Come, not only in regards to the program, but also in regards to reconciliation efforts within the Canadian Armed Forces.
What do you think it means for some of these veterans of all different ages and to be here today to interact with each other and speak to each other?
I think it's really important. I think it's really meaningful for a lot of folks. Speaking as a First Nation veteran myself, I know what it's like to be surrounded by folks of that shared lived experience of wearing the uniform and that service history, and being around your peers and your comrades in a day of celebration and honoring. It's really heartwarming, and it brings a lot of healing to a lot of folks. We started the day off with a good day with a pipe ceremony with the drum groups, and we also had the Canadian Highlanders Pipes and Drum Band. And having those two distinct music styles of the First Nation drum group and also the military pipes and drums really brings together two pieces of our identity, the military history and our First Nation background. One of the things that we keep hearing is the need for a traditional health policy to be adopted by Veteran Affairs Canada. And what that looks like is when a veteran goes downtown to Health Sciences Centre for some treatment for their PTSD, the cost for their transportation, their medicine, and the clinician's fees are all covered by Veteran Affairs. If that same veteran goes to their First Nation and seeks traditional healing practices, the cost for transportation, sacred medicines, and the honorarium for the practitioner all is burdened by the veteran. Veterans deserve to be treated the way that they want to be treatment and seek that treatment the way that suits them. I believe that's important, and a lot of the folks here have been echoing those statements today. We also know First Nations people in Canada have an 11-year shorter life expectancy gap, and for Veteran Affairs to adopt a traditional health policy, it would go towards shortening that gap and mending some of those practices. So, doing the work I do now, I engage a lot on the 17-wing military base locally, and the work that they're doing is incredible. They have a sweat lodge right at 17 Wing on the base, and currently serving members, veterans, and the public can go engage in cultural ceremonies at the sweat lodge ceremony on base. That's something that I didn't get to experience when I was in, and it really warms my heart to see how far we've come. Our keynote speaker today, Master Warrant Officer Robert Brown, shared some of those insights as his role as the Indigenous advisor for the Commander of the Army, and we've really come a long way.
Justin Woodcock, the First Nations Veterans Program Manager with Southern Chiefs Organization, speaking over the weekend with CBC's Gavin Axelrod. Remembrance Day, of course, a week from tomorrow. Okay. Well, if you were listening to World Report, you heard a little bit about what's happening. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza has been in place now since October 10th. Almost a month later, though, some points of the peace plan have been implemented. But the experts say that the situation remains fragile at best. Over the weekend, the bodies of more hostages were returned to Israel, but deadly strikes continued in what the Israeli military says is retaliation for attacks against its soldiers. For a closer look at this morning, Jesse Rosenfeld is with us, Canadian contributor to Rolling Stone magazine, and he joins us with from Ramallah with his perspective. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So how confident are you that negotiations will continue to move on to the next phase given the recent developments?
Well, seeing as Israel bombed Gaza last night, killing 2 people, as just this morning killed another person on for allegedly crossing the yellow line, which is the demarcation line of Israeli redeployment, the first phase of the ceasefire that's left Israel in control and occupying 53% of Gaza. That only adds to the fact that Israel has killed more than 220 Palestinians in Gaza since the ceasefire started, while was only allowing half of the aid that it committed to in the first phase to enter the Strip, along with no reconstruction materials. And the only machinery that's being allowed in is machinery to search for the bodies of Israeli hostages who are buried under 90% of Gaza, Gaza, which has been turned to rubble. So there is no real talk about moving towards the second phase at this point. The Israelis have made clear that this is that they intend to hold things as they are, if not go back to war. While for Palestinians, there is a fear that this is just another temporary pause like the last ceasefire.
And if I may interject just for the other perspective, what's your sense of where we're at right now with the ceasefire from the Hamas point of view and whether or not they've held up to what they said they would do?
Well, for Hamas, the main Israeli justification for violations of the ceasefire has been a claim that Hamas has not yet returned all the bodies of the hostages. At the same time, Hamas is not exactly in a position to go to war because this was not so much a ceasefire deal that was negotiated as it was a surrender document that the U.S. and Israel presented to Hamas, basically accepting a 20-point plan with very vague and easily malleable stages that were at Israeli discretion as to how the process would move on. Alongside effectively an ultimatum that Palestinians accept these terms that have resulted in the current conditions of no day after and no prospect of it happening, or the continued genocide in Gaza until Israel had completed a stated goal of its cabinet, which was the expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza. So left between the ultimatum of a continued genocidal war and as much pause as possible, this is what's been accepted. And this is what Israel generally is banking on Palestinians understanding.
Just if this peace process is to be successful in any meaningful or long-term way, in your view, what needs to change?
Well, it's only being called a peace process by the Trump administration. the general sentiment from the Israeli public, which is incredibly relieved to have its hostages back, and that is actually enabled Israeli society to start to move forward from the question that had ripped it apart throughout the war on its direction of the war. The sentiment in Israel is with Gaza in ruins, the West Bank not under a ceasefire and under continued Israeli expansion and attack, and Israel reducing the rest of the region to rubble while striking Lebanon regularly, that the war is simply in their hands to move forward as they will. Well, for Palestinians, what they're seeing is the prospect of at best holding to any sense of quiet or comparative calm, with the constant fear that this will end just like the last ceasefire ended when Trump came into office, lost interest, and Israel went back to war.
Jesse, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jesse Rosenfeld is a Canadian contributor to Rolling Stone magazine. He joined us from Ramallah. Who doesn't feel kind of bad for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, given that we're hosting the Grey Cup this year? Their season, as we've been telling you, did come to an end over the weekend. It also ended, though, their streak of 5 straight trips to the Grey Cup. And as I mentioned, in a year when Winnipeg's hosting. They lost 42-33 against the Montreal Alouettes. They did rally late in the game, but couldn't get it done. Players spoke to reporters yesterday during the final media availability for the season, including, as you may have heard a bit in the news, defensive lineman Willie Jefferson.
It's been ups and downs, being resilient, showing grit, showing that, we can stick in it, fight, and, make our way back. Like once we did come back and then go take the lead and stuff like that, like it was a different vibe on the sideline, right? Like it was coming out of the locker room at halftime, like we had a sense of belief, right? From that first drive when the guys took the ball down the field and scored and things like that, we already knew it was like our time to turn the tables. And when we did that, we just couldn't finish the game how we wanted to.
What kind of thought have you given about playing again and playing here if you
do? To be totally honest, I haven't really given it much thought, right? Like talking to Coach O'Shea yesterday after the game, talking to the coaches, the defensive coaches and things like that, just talking to them and just letting them know how I felt and see how they felt about things and stuff like that. They just told a lot of the guys, like in my situation and stuff like that, don't worry about that type of stuff right now. Like just try to connect with your teammates and things like that before everybody leaves. But, after that, just try to focus on the holidays, going back and spending that time with your family and friends and things like that. And then when you get the opportunity to start worrying about next year, then we'll talk about it. We'd love to play another season here, right? This is where I've been for the last 5 years and made some great things happen. I can continue to see great things happening. Just trying to keep it going, right? Just trying to continue to be a dominant force, continue to be a leader, continue to be a pillar for this team, right? And a pillar for the CFL, right? You know what I'm saying? For the young guys coming from the States or for wherever, right? When they see what Winnipeg football is and they see me, I want them to see a beacon, right? A bright light, right? Nothing dim about being here and things like that, but then also coming to the CFL, like when they check out the CFL and see what the CFL is all about my guys coming from the States, and just see that you can come up here, make a name for yourself, have some fun, and then hopefully play in front of an amazing fan base like we have. The environment, the culture that we built here in Winnipeg for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, we hold ourselves to a high standard, right? And any team or any player that's been in the CFL for the last 8 years and things like that, and you've seen what we've built here, and they know, like, guys want to be a part of this culture, right? Guys want to come from other teams and be a part of this culture. They see the guys that we have on this team. They see the coaches that we have on this team. They see the fan base that we have for all these home games and even for the games when we travel, right? They just want to be a part of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and I can see nothing but it continuing to grow, right? This was an amazing year. We had so many great things happen on the offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, special teams as well, and you can just see it continue to grow.
Defensive lineman Willie Jefferson of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers speaking to reporters yesterday. And so the season for the Bombers is over. They lost 42-33 against the Montreal Alouettes. That ends their streak of 5 straight Grey Cup appearances. Now, keep in mind, just because Winnipeg's not in it, there's going to be a whole ton of things going on in a couple of weeks here for the Grey Cup. Winnipeg is hosting. And if you've never been to a Grey Cup, then you may not know how much goes on around it. Every team's going to have parties and socials and gatherings leading up. There's going to be festivities. There's the awards night. All of that will be happening and hosted here in our city. It is federal budget day tomorrow. As you've been hearing, the Carney government will reveal to us the vision for the economic management of Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Federal Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne have already warned there will be austerity measures. Now, among them, that the federal public service will be reduced in size. To talk about that and more, Thomas Galipeau is with us, political scientist at the University of Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's start there. What are you expecting by way of the cuts to the public service?
So no one knows exactly what is coming, but it could be significant because earlier this year, all ministries were given the directive to find 15% in economies. So there's multiple ways the government usually reduces its spending. The most common one is attrition, layoffs, and buyout. So in general sense, the public servants are incentivized to retire early with different package to sweeten their deal and lay them off. Then these positions are closed without anyone replacing them. So on the surface, that's pretty seamless and painless because people were just quit a little early. But since they're not replaced, it can increase workload on other public servants. In a similar fashion, programs can be led to quote-unquote sunset. This means that when the funding ends, they are not renewed. So it just ends. And finally, the government can also merge certain services in the hope of reducing administrative personnel. So merging two services together can cut on communication, on legal, on HR, on all these things that can be handled just in one department.
Do we know specifically, you said above the board, all the departments have been asked to find, to cuts, to find inefficiencies or to take stock of who they might, as you said, send into retirement or through attrition, open positions. But do we know what areas might be most affected in the civil service?
So again, it's really uncertain. I can start with what is certain, though. It's really likely that the Department of National Defense, Canada Border Service Agency, and Royal Canadian Mounted Police will not be affected, since we've been receiving from the government steady signaling that the major investment would be made in those departments. But I was reading a public policy report that looked into which program could sunset if not renewed. And these programs targeted a lot of women's program, emergency program, environmental and transportation program that could be affected.
What's the government's case for why this should happen, and what have we seen before that might give us an understanding of how it might?
So let's start by the first question. The case for efficiency is that since 2015, I looked at the numbers, and about 3% per year increase in the public sector, while the population has grown by 1.5%. So that means that the public sector has grown twice as fast as the population for the past 10 years. So that's compounded over 10 years. That means a big mismatch between what the public sector is expected to be and what it actually is. And so the second part was the history of retrenchment.
Mm-hmm.
So the first big wave was in the 1990s following the rapidly rising public debt problem. Also a very big neoliberal era with ideas of balanced budget at all costs. So these governments, that means late Mulroney, Chrétien, and Martin government, really did the job by reducing transfer to provinces in healthcare, but also with attrition layoff with about 45,000 people. The second wave was following the 08 and 09 financial crisis, where major cuts were made after the stimulus packages, where economies have to be found, and they were found by laying off around 20,000 people, but also more specifically by cutting back in program like in the environmental sector, Statistic Canada, remember the census, for example, and foreign affairs, among others. But both of these eras did bring a balanced budget and also even created budget surplus.
Politically, what might be the fallout from this reduction?
The fallout is really unclear because it's often relying on public opinion, how people see that. The question how they're asked in surveys often don't really provide clear trade-offs with cuts and their effect. But a majority of people do support the idea that deficit is an important issue and believe that spending reductions are required. How much, it is unclear. The data was too spread out. But at the same time, a majority also support higher taxes on the wealthier individual to finance the spending. They also want to protect important sectors like healthcare, housing, and senior benefit. And finally, even though these cuts might be painful, 46% trusted Carney to deliver a budget that hurts the least, compared to 38% for Poilievre. So the next question is, the government is still a minority. How these
who's going to step up to pass it?
And exactly, totally.
There's some analysis this morning that the NDP say they won't support an austerity budget, but I understand they said that some of their members could not vote on the budget, which effectively would still put the Liberals over the top to pass this thing. And not have the NDP in the position of supporting something that obviously, anything with cuts to the union, the NDP is not going to step up and support. So that could be a possible path forward, I guess, Thomas.
Exactly. Usually, have we seen in the past 5-6 years, the NDP has always been to the side of the Liberal Party to help them when they were in a position of minority.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thomas Galipeau, political scientist at the University of Toronto. We have more analysis coming up tomorrow being budget day, Mark Carney's first budget. Remember, he got in the spring and he delayed his budget until now. Next on the show, let's build on the story that Heather's had in the news this morning. To the town, it is a, quote, sinkhole for the federal government. They're calling it a, quote, infrastructure-caused collapse. But regardless of what you call it, it's causing grief for the residents of Rosenort, Manitoba. This is a massive hole. It is impassable for cars. It is located on Pleasant Valley Road, and it's taken out both lanes. It's left a single skinny piece of land on either side. Water from the Morris River surges on one side of this hole to the other through a collapsed culvert. CBC's Jim Agapito went to the arm of Morris to see it for himself.
Along this country road, there's an issue. This sinkhole is cutting off access for nearby homes, causing stress for the community of Rosenort, Manitoba.
It's a fair-sized sinkhole that we have here.
According to Deputy Reeve Mervyn Dewick, the hole first appeared in April. 7 months later, it's grown significantly.
Essentially, it's culverts that let go, either rusted or separated, and it creates a cavern underneath, and it just slowly erodes underneath. This could have been going on for, who knows, a year already. I would say it's roughly 20 feet deep, 100 feet long, 30 feet wide.
People who live here say it's posing challenges for the community.
It's road access for the 2 yards that are immediately across here that are caught between the Morris River and the diversion that we have. What we have done to help them out is we graveled the dike road, which is strictly for their use and not for public use.
What it means is that 2 residents can use the dike road, while the rest of the community finds a workaround, which means long commute times in a community that already has limited roads. And it poses a safety hazard, as resident Luke Corbett explains.
I mean, the drop there is somewhere between 12 and 20 feet. It's a big drop. Well, there's a few families that would come by very often, and I would just caution them that things were actively falling in and we didn't want anyone to get hurt.
But in order to start repairs, the municipality needs approval from the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
They want the fish ladders. From what we understand right now, they're putting in bigger culverts, lowering them into the riverbed, And then normally I think what they've done is they put rock in there so that the fish can swim through. They needed input on this project.
And that's because it's shared with the Morris River, is that
Yeah,
correct?
it is the Morris River that we're crossing. It's caused us a little bit of grief.
In a statement to CBC, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans said they provided advice on how to protect the fish, their habitats, and stabilizing the water crossing. They also gave guidance on how to replace a culvert under the Fisheries Act. But the Reeve says this community will have to be patient for that work to begin.
First of all, we got the engineering done and jump through all the government hoops, and then we got to find a way to fund it. I mean, 1.2 million, if that's where it ends up being that we have to do, that's going to take a little bit to do that.
Luke Corbett says he just wants the repairs to start.
When you start bringing in different government agencies that need to make decisions and say this is who's going to do this, that's not happening within a year.
And that means people living here are going to have to take the long way around for the foreseeable future. Jim Agapito, CBC News, Rosenort, Manitoba.
So as we mentioned, the federal government prefers to call this a, quote, infrastructure-caused collapse, end quote. In an email, a spokesperson for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans says they provided the RM with guidance on how to fix the hole while minimizing the impact on nearby fish habitat. The email went on to say DFO, quote, received a request for the review for the culvert replacement on September 29th. 2025. A letter of advice was sent to the Arm of Morris October 8th, 2025, and construction is proposed to start on January 26th, end quote, just to reiterate some of the hoped-for timelines, although, as you heard, residents are skeptical. If you want to see the story once again, check out our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. We've been talking so much about sports. I just want to take a moment for the arts. I saw the show at MTC this weekend, Life of Pi, and we had the artistic director of the theater on talking about these amazing puppets that are part of that show. They really were incredible. I've never seen puppeteering like that before on stage, seeing the tiger come to life and all the sounds and subtle movements. So the artists that were on stage were just amazing, including the leads. So it's just really, really solid show and busy for Saturday afternoon. In Winnipeg, it's calm. It's 4 degrees. The high today is 9. And you might have handed out candy in between all of the heartbreak sports losses over the weekend. On Friday night, of course, the Jays playing Game 6, but people still handing out candy. Now, you might still have candy this morning. This Monday morning is always the one where it shows up everywhere. The leftover candy makes its way into the office, into your lunches, on side tables wherever you're at, the reception desks if you're out and about. But with all these piles of candy sitting all over the place, we wanted to revisit the science behind sugar's short-term effects. Here's Blair Sanderson.
Sugar alert! Let's go!
This is part of a public service announcement aimed at kids from the 1990s. It features a girl stuffing her face with candy who starts literally bouncing off the walls of a padded room.
She's trapped in a hyperchamber. That's where you go when you have too much sugar.
Fast forward to today, and that idea still persists. Selena Carmali is a pediatric dietitian in Vancouver.
I'm a mom myself, and I know that a lot of my friends say it sometimes, or if I'm at a birthday party, I overhear parents talking about how they're in for it maybe later on because of all the candy or all the treats that are at parties. And to be honest, I also grew up thinking the exact same thing because my parents told me that sugar made me hyper.
But Carmali says that link between sugar and unbridled energy is often overstated. Sure, candy does cause glucose levels in the bloodstream to go up, but it's not a huge difference from eating something like a banana that has natural sugars. It just happens a bit faster with candy. And while that speed of absorption can't be discounted, Carmali says there are often other factors at play. For instance, sweets are often served during celebrations or other occasions that break from a child's normal routine.
So I do think it's kind of this perfect storm sometimes at these events that cause this perception of hyperactivity, and it's super easy to just pin it on the sugar because then it feels like something you can control. Like if I limit my kids' sugar intake, then they won't have this hyperactivity behavior at these parties. when really I think those things would happen regardless because they're in an excited environment.
Even in calmer settings, it's not easy to conclude what's going on when sugar is on the menu. Carmali points to a blind experiment that involved two groups of kids. One group ate sugary foods. The other was given a sugar substitute. In both cases, the parents reported their children became more hyperactive.
There is no objective measure for parents to use or for anybody really to use when it comes to kind of measuring that. So you have to think about, is there a placebo effect going on?
Christy King is a registered nutritionist at Texas Children's Hospital. She too says it's hard to understand all the factors that contribute to the so-called sugar high. However, she's more certain of what follows a spike in blood glucose.
Then we end up having this crash down. So what goes up must come down.
Dietitian Selena Carmelli agrees. The corresponding drop from a rapid increase in blood sugar is better understood.
It's actually that come down of blood sugars that sometimes can have symptoms of irritability and fussiness and maybe eventually lead to meltdowns. And so I wonder sometimes if we're kind of, assuming that sugar causes this hyperactivity when really it's coming down from that increase in blood sugar very quickly and kind of causing that like quote unquote crash that happens when your blood sugar does lower too quickly.
Put another way, it's the low from too much candy that's more real than the high that came before it. For CBC Radio, I'm Blair Sanderson.
Well, one way to avoid a sugar crash from candy is to eat nutritious foods around the same time. So things like with fiber, proteins, healthy fats, they all play a role, by the way, in slowing the absorption of glucose into our bloodstream. And that can prevent those rapid spikes that can lead to lower lows. So this is music from The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. It's part of the repertoire of a new wind orchestra along with music from other popular video games. The Winnipeg Video Game Orchestra is performing its first big concert November 14th at Jubilee Place. And we wanted a preview. So Dann Bjornson is director of the orchestra and he's a trombone player. He's the group's conductor as well. You were conducting along as you were listening, I saw, Dann.
That's right, yes.
Tell me a little bit about how this orchestra came together. Very cool.
Yeah, this is something that I knew it was something that was possible. There were other groups similar to this in other cities. There's one in a big one in Montreal, and we have a very, very strong community band community here in Manitoba and in Winnipeg. And so I knew it was possible. We just needed somebody to do it. And I decided that this year was going to be the year that we do it, and talked to some people, talked to some musicians, and it just grew and grew and grew. And it eventually, and here we are. We had our first show. You can see if you're watching this summer.
YouTube, yeah.
And first show this summer. We got rained out on our initial first show, but we had a little backup plan, and that worked out for us.
Where are you guys there? I'm just looking at the shot.
Yeah, so there is at University of Manitoba.
Yep.
Our wonderful ambassador for the community band program, Dr. Jackie Dawson, director of bands at U of M, asked us to come and play at her concert.
What is it about video music, music from video games that has so much appeal? What draws you to it?
It's especially for someone of my generation. It's something that we grew up with. It's something that we have deep nostalgic feelings for. With so much awful stuff going on in the world, it's just something that brings us back to a place of comfort, and it's just a place of joy, an escape. It's all those positive feelings that come with that.
I guess it's really no different than a movie score in many ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's unique challenges that composers have with video game music of how interactive it is. When you're watching a movie, you can only watch a movie one way, but you can play a video game so many different ways, and so many people can get different experiences out of it that way.
Yeah.
And so it presents a unique challenge for them, and it's something that's unique to that medium.
how beneficial is it if the musicians actually play the games or see the games, or how do you handle that? Because as you said, you're losing sound, or things are amping up sound. It depends on how the game is played. So tone becomes very important, and so does cadence. How do you teach that to an orchestra?
Yeah, so I mean, we have an extremely diverse group of musicians in the band in terms of age and in terms of experience, and some have never, their only experience with video games has been like Pac-Man, she said.
Yep.
One of my musicians said. And so knowing the melodies and how they feel them, it brings a certain emotion into how they play it. But the newer people, the people who haven't really played, are now experiencing it, and now they're feeling that emotion themselves, and they're experiencing it in a new way.
The orchestra made its debut this summer at the U of M, as we just saw at that band concert. How much have you added to your repertoire? Like, tell us about some of the games you can represent now at this upcoming show.
So yeah, if you were at that first show or saw it on our YouTube channel, Winnipeg Video Game Orchestra on YouTube, we did some of the classics like Super Mario Brothers, Pokemon, Zelda, as you heard. But at this concert, it's all going to be new stuff. You're going to hear another Zelda from Ocarina of Time. You're going to hear some songs from Halo, from the first two Sonic games, Kingdom Hearts, whole gambit, and then plus there's a jazz band that's going to be playing before us, and they have their whole set. I don't know what they're going to play yet, but they're going to be doing a whole.
As you mentioned, this is done in other cities. You saw the appeal here. What goes into actually doing this, though? Do you have to what's the work involved in making this a score?
So there's tons of different things. There's the groups in Montreal specifically. They did a lot of work in creating a lot of the repertoire, because usually there isn't really, you can't just go in and buy Mario Brothers music from Nintendo. That doesn't really happen. People have to rearrange it and write it down for Wind Band, and they've done a ton of work in building that repertoire. So we've been using some of that, and we've been accessing some of our local composers and arrangers to get that music in our hands. And then it's just a matter of getting a rehearsal space and finding the musicians. Finding the musicians was the easy part, because Winnipeg is such a strong community of musicians.
Can anyone join the orchestra? I understand there's no audition, but there's gonna be a level that you need. We heard how good the music is.
Yeah. There's a base expectation of ability. I don't want to throw somebody into the deep end, and they just struggle and then they never want to play their instrument again. I would hate for that to happen. As a music educator, I know how that feeling. But we are a community group, and I want as many people to experience this music as possible. And so just reach out via our email on the website, wvgo.ca, and we'll have a conversation.
Okay, wvgo.ca.
Yeah, that's right.
You can check things out there. And then November 14th at Jubilee Place, Eventbrite has the tickets. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Now, that is Dann Bjornson, director of the Winnipeg Video Game Orchestra. They're getting ready for their first bigger show, and hopefully with an eye to do a couple of these a year. The Genesis concert is happening on November 14th in the evening. As I mentioned, it is at Jubilee Place. And once again, you can get tickets through Eventbrite. Well, just to note, our next piece on the radio here contains some strong language. The city of Winnipeg is about to bring in new restrictions on homeless encampments, rules that take effect November 17th. The rules restrict where encampments can be set up, and our team here at CBC Manitoba, as you heard in the news, mapped out where those restrictions will apply. So they also went to talk to people living in the camps, to nearby neighbors, to city officials, to find out all about what these new rules could actually mean. To talk us through all of this with the maps, if you're watching on YouTube, CBC reporter Cameron MacLean is in studio. Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so Cameron, what exactly, to start with, are the new restrictions? Remind us.
So starting November 17th, encampments will no longer be allowed within 50 meters of places like playgrounds, spray pads, swimming pools, or daycares, or 30 meters from transit stops, bridges, or docks. And when council passed a motion calling for this back in September, we mapped out where those restrictions would be, focusing on the downtown. And that's where most of the restrictions are. And if you look on the map, you can see that it essentially blankets much of the downtown, including riverbanks, parks, where we've seen lots of tents pop up in recent years.
And I know on YouTube it's still kind of hard to make out, but we're listing the priorities there for you. If you go on our website, you can clearly see all of the dots. And as you're mentioning, it shows really sort of where things are encompassed. And a lot of those blue dots, which is within 30 meters of transit shelters, there's quite a lot of them, obviously, through the downtown core. It does look like some places like parks along riverbanks as well, if I'm looking at this maps, where we see most homeless encampments, are pretty much all now along the riverbanks no-go zones. What did you hear from people who are living specifically in those encampments then?
Yeah, well, our digital video producer, Victoria Tashnik, who worked on this project with me, she visited one of the camps along the river behind the Granite Curling Club in Mawston Park. This camp is in kind of an interesting spot because it's near a daycare and the curling club, but possibly not close enough, depending on how the city measures the distances. Victoria spoke to a woman named Janine Desjardins. She feels they're not hurting anyone and says she has nowhere else to go.
I'm not moving. What for? I don't know. I'm not doing nothing to no one. I don't know what the problem is. It's not like they're out here every day, all day long.
Janine says she's been trying to get housing, but she rarely hears back. And if she's told to leave, she says she'll likely just move farther down the riverbank.
And if you do look at the maps to see how this is playing out, as Cameron said, it's hard to know how they're going to measure. And that's because the measurement could come from the riverbank to the building, but then it goes across a parking lot. So it's hard to tell what they're going to consider that, that sweet spot.
Exactly.
What about other people who live in the camp?
Well, we also heard from a guy named Lucien Barron. He's another resident, and he actually supports keeping camps away from playgrounds. He says he has an 8-year-old daughter.
I'm glad they're enforcing it. Like I wouldn't bring my daughter down here, not a chance. And when they did the splash pad on Ross, I mean, the Bear Clan went and picked up over 50,000 needles in a span of 3 days before they started construction. That's disgusting. I couldn't even imagine if they swept this place, how many there would be.
So can you just elaborate sort of on the distances I just mentioned? Because you said the camp may be at risk of being shut down. So walk us through what you meant by that.
Mm-hmm. So the camp is, as I mentioned, is near the Granite Curling Club, which could be considered a recreation facility under the new rules. They say no camps are allowed within 50 meters, but is that from the building itself or from the property line? That could make a big difference for the people living in the camp. And it also kind of shows how the city has left some vagueness in these rules, maybe intentionally. It gives them options of how heavy-handed they want to be when they're enforcing it.
Okay, thanks for reiterating, because I always forget the distance, so it's 50 meters. Keep that in our heads. You also spoke to people who live near the encampments then, so what did they say?
Yeah, in the apartment building next to that same park, residents say they've dealt with thefts and safety concerns. I spoke to one guy named Billy J. He showed us the back fence where people have cut through and into the parking lot. He's had several bikes stolen, and once somebody lit a fire in front of his apartment door. That was just earlier this summer. He says he wants to feel empathy for the people living outside, but he feels like his rights are being infringed on.
I can show you downstairs in the garage where they've broken through the fencing, come in, stole things off cars, just caused bedlam. Well, you'll be sleeping in the lobby, okay? I don't want to be all NIMBY about it, not in my backyard, but I'm paying. I want to feel for these people, but not at the expense of you're robbing me.
Billy also told us he supports the city's new rules, but he doubts they'll make much of a difference. He doubts they'll be enforced, really, and that the weather, not City Hall, will actually drive people away.
Did the city explain how the rules will actually be enforced? I've asked that question and I haven't had a lot of clarity.
Yeah, I asked Mayor Scott Gillingham, and he says the approach will start with conversation. Officers and outreach teams will be asking people to move and trying to connect them with housing or shelter.
To say to those who are living in a tent, for example, in a park, to say you can't be there. Let's get you the help you need. Let's get you into either a shelter or into, connected with housing. That's the goal. I think, the hard enforcement, I think will be very few and far between.
There's still a lot of uncertainty about how these rules will be enforced and what the enforcement will look like. Greg McPherson, the acting director of community development, he wrote the policy and he says they're figuring it out as they go. McPherson says the document guiding their conduct is a living document. That's what he called it. And it'll be amended as they move forward and learn.
The motion passed ununanimously at council. That means not everybody supported the approach.
No, sorry.
Pardon me, it passed unanimously. Sherry Rollins, though, isn't on board.
She has some reservations. She did vote for it, but she made clear that she has some concerns. Her main reason for supporting it was to get more information, released to councillors. But she's the councillor for Fort Rouge, East Fort Garry, which includes that area, Mawston Park. And she supported earlier outreach programs, but she's worried these new rules will simply push people from one place to another without fixing anything.
For me as the local counselor, you can see that migration and the emails, whether they're along the Assiniboine or they've now moved behind every single business in Osborne Village and in a little parklet, more proximate in the densest neighborhood that we've got, Osborne Village. It is no different. It isn't taking anything away. It's certainly not housing people. It's just making very vulnerable people have to work all day to get the same belongings, that sleeping bag or what have you, and move it somewhere else.
Another one of Rollins's concerns is the lack of resources being committed to this plan. They're starting with only 2 bylaw officers and 1 coordinator.
So what happens from here?
So the rules officially take effect November 17th, although the city admits it will take some time to figure out what enforcement really looks like. They'll report back to council next year and to say how it went and what needs to change. I want to go back to Janine Descharlet, the camp resident that we heard from earlier. She has a message for people who think that she and other people in the camp don't belong where they are.
But they should just think about it. Instead of being so fucking self-centered and just because they have everything, a lot of people don't have the funds to get out of here. It's sickening.
Cameron, thank you.
Thank you very much.
CBC's Cameron MacLean, full story and the maps on encampment restrictions now up at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Well, in a day, Manitobans and across the country, all Canadians are going to learn how the federal Liberal government is planning to spend our tax dollars and what you're going to get in return. It's also a test, some say, for both the federal NDP and the federal Conservatives to support a Mark Carney budget and the risk that the optics of that are going to have, or oppose it and then bring on another election. Less than a year into this government. So let's get some insight. They are here. Our panel is both political veterans and proud Manitobans. Our partisan panel's back. We haven't talked since the election. Dann Vandal, newly retired Liberal MP and former cabinet minister, is in studio. Hey, Dan.
Good morning.
Erin Selby's also here, former NDP MLA and former cabinet minister in Manitoba. Good morning.
Good morning.
And then Dorothy Dobbie's also in studio, former Progressive Conservative MP and parliamentary secretary. Hello.
Good morning.
So why don't we start with you, Dan? Sure. You're the Liberal. It's been a long time since you watched the federal budget come down from the sidelines. What does Mark Carney need to get right tomorrow?
Well, I think it's important to note, first of all, that Canada and the world is living in a new world order. We have a new president of the United States, and we have an American government that's now they're on the same side as the Russians. That has all sorts of implications. It has implications for the North. It has implications for defense spending. And the government and the Prime Minister have already committed to 5% of defense spending, of GDP, 5% of GDP of defense spending by 2025. That is a huge number. That needs to begin tomorrow in a significant way. And I'm hoping that there's going to be some spin-offs for the North, specifically Churchill. I'm looking for that in the budget. We also have to diversify our trade, so there has to be initiatives for that in the budget. And we also need to protect our industries against the negative effects of Trump tariffs in the States. So that has to be in the budget. So there's going to be more spending in certain areas, and we're waiting to see what the effects of that are in other areas, reconciliation, the environment, and quality of life issues. they've already announced, federal government has already announced that the school food program is good, it's safe, it's going to be there. That's incredibly positive. I'm looking to see more initiatives that are protected.
Dorothy, from your conservative perspective, what are you wanting in tomorrow's budget, and what are you concerned might be in it?
Well, I don't think it matters what I want. And I don't think it matters what any Conservative wants right now. We've gone 3/4 of the year through this particular fiscal year, so the spending has already happened. But let's look at the future, and I agree, we do have to increase our defence spending. We obviously aren't going to make 5% by the end of 2025, probably more like 2030, and that's, I support that. But I think there are some tough choices for Mr. Carney. And I'm not sure how he's going to handle all of them. You can't deliver all of these extras and not cut. So while we talk about school programs and so on, what's on the chopping block? And there are lots of things that are. But there won't be enough to be able to manage to keep the budget down to something reasonable. And the deficit, I should say.
One of the things that's come up is a number already that CBC is reporting that suggests that the amount of money coming in from counter tariffs is about $3 billion, and it was projected to be $20, which is what was promised earlier in the year. So, what's your sense of how worried you are about, as a Canadian, as a Manitoban, about what that deficit number could be?
Well, we've heard as much as $100 million. I don't know if it'll go that high. I don't know how we would sustain that. We've heard from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that we have hit the wall, and I think we should take that seriously. That's their job, to be as honest as possible and to be nonpartisan. So I am concerned, and I don't know how we're going to manage this. I do agree that we all have to find a way to support the best possible answers and to fight the ones that aren't going to work. We're going to have to make some tough decisions. I think Mark Carney's right about that.
Just before I move to Erin, Dan touched on a Manitoba piece, which was wanting money for Churchill. As a Manitoban, what are you hoping for in the budget?
They've already spent $562 million between the province and the feds, and they've got nothing to show for it. So why do we have to spend money for those kinds of projects? Why can't that come from private investment? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the barriers, the trade barriers are so high, the development barriers are so high through the regulations in this country that doing something new is very, very difficult, and we can't get people to invest because it's it's a dead end for them.
I'm going to come back to you because, of course, one of your two parties, or the Bloc, although that doesn't look likely at all, has to support the government to have this go through. But let's turn to Erin for the NDP. What are you worried about in tomorrow's budget?
What I'm worried about is whenever I hear Liberal governments, Conservative governments talk about austerity, they forget who it is that has to pay that price. And it is working Canadians, it is families, and I want to make sure that they're remembered. When we're talking about spending in one area and cutting and we're all going to suffer, I know who that's going to be. That's going to be Canadian families. That's going to be working families. So I hope there's something in there for them. I agree this is an important budget. We've got a lot of things we need to look at, but we have to remember that people right now are having a hard time paying their rent. Yeah. They're having a hard time getting groceries on the table, and it can't get any worse for them. They need support.
You two are agreeing, so I just want to get them both on camera because that's
because it's never happened before.
It has.
Oh, it happens.
This morning, there was a specific interview we did about the cuts that were being forecast to the civil service, and also what departments might sort of, what been the priorities. So one of the things that has come up is that the environment might be taking a back burner to some of that spending and to what happens in terms of strengthening, economic industry and build, and then also cuts to the civil service might be coming, which all the departments have been warned. Do you want to weigh in on that? Obviously, that's the NDP's bread and butter.
Young people especially are going to be furious to see once again we're ignoring the environment, because I live with a bunch of young people and that is one of their most important issues. But at the same time, I'm thinking people need to be able to put food on the table, and that's what I'm right now more worried about. When we talk about cutting jobs, I don't see how this helps the economy, because people with jobs spend money. People without jobs need more support. So this is something that concerns me.
It's interesting because all three of you, though, were on the page of all of you have made a point of saying this is a different time and this is an important budget. And so given that it's an important budget, CBC is reporting this morning, Erin, that NDP senior source says that the path could be that some NDP MPs sit out the vote. They don't support the budget, but they sit out so it goes through.
I don't think any decision has been made, but right now, whether or not this budget passes is in Mark Carney's hands. If he makes a budget that people can live with, that people won't suffer needlessly, that he'll have support for the people who austerity hits the hardest, then that budget will pass. But if he only thinks about his bottom line, that's going to be tough for NDPers to agree to.
Conservatives, the party's leadership saying to CBC senior sources, they don't want the election, but they're also opposed to voting for the budget. How do you hope that your party does? How do you hope they, what the MPs do tomorrow? What are your hopes?
Well, I'll tell you what I would do if I were the premier or the leader.
Yep.
I would probably let some people stay out. This is not the time for an election. So, somebody might get sick or break their toe or their foot or something like that and can't come. Although today that's harder because they can vote by phone. But, it's going to be a difficult decision. I think it probably will rest at the end of the day with the NDP.
So you say not time for an election. What do you say, Erin?
I don't think that anyone wants an election right now.
By the way, we're the only one that can afford it. But
we're in a leadership race right now as well. So it's certainly not a prime time for us. But at the same time, it's our responsibility as NDPers to look out for average families, for working people, and we cannot sit by if they're the ones who are going to be hurt by the austerity.
Dan, I know you've been listening in.
Yes.
I'm not sure which point you want to weigh in on, so I'll just throw it back to you, and then I can refocus us here. If you want.
I agree. I don't think anybody wants an election, especially Canadians. Canadians do not want an election. We're in unprecedented times. People have to remember that Mark Carney's only been a politician. He's only been a prime minister for 6 months.
He's only been in the House, once?
Canadians elected him because they deemed that Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh were not mature enough to face this challenge. So that you've got to give Carney a chance. Nobody wants an election. Someone's going to get sick. Someone's going to lose their phone. I don't anticipate there's going to be an election. There's a lot of work to do. These are tough times, but that's why we elected Mark Carney 6 months ago.
But we didn't elect him with a majority, so he still has to play in the sandbox. Whether he likes it or not, he does have a responsibility to make sure that he's working with everyone. And from what I've seen, he hasn't been in the House. He's been all over the world, so he really doesn't build those relationships in the House right now.
Well, he's, part of being retired is that I can watch Question Period now. So I've seen Mark Carney in the House quite a bit, but I understand that he's the Prime Minister of Canada in tumultuous times for the world. So he's got to be out there. He's got to be opening new markets all over the world so that we can diversify our economy.
And he's got to be taking care of Canadians at home. He has to remember that austerity hits people who have the least.
So what does that look like? Because the two of you, Dorothy and Erin, have both been nodding emphatically when you're talking about the average Canadian taking care at home, even in the face of building up the economy and dealing with tariffs and dealing with the international turmoil. What is that going to look like in a budget line to say to you, okay, he's thought about people?
This is a few things for me. I mean, there's social support. I would love to see pharmacare expanded. I don't expect that we're going to see that this time. I want to see people have access to jobs, and that might mean training. We're talking about how Canada has to do more research. We can't do more research or more innovation if people aren't getting training. So we need to make sure there's access to education. There needs to be jobs. There needs to be, I'm good with infrastructure building because that actually creates jobs, but it also has to happen in places like Manitoba.
Dorothy, what do you need in the budget to prove to you that he hasn't forgotten the people that are having trouble make ends meet, the average Manitoban, if you will?
Well, as I said before, I think it's important that you allow new investment to come into the community. And we don't see that. You mentioned earlier that you think he might cut the environment. He's net zero, Carney. He's not going to cut the environment for sure. And in fact, that's one of the barriers, because instead of considering that this is a critical time where people can't get enough to eat and they don't have houses. And, you talked earlier about the housing situation in Manitoba. That's all part of the cause and effect. So as I said, it's going to be a difficult balancing act. I think what we're going to see is printing more money, which increases inflation, and we're going into more of the same. Now, when I say I don't think it's time for a budget, I don't think it's time for a budget for an election now. Give it another 3 or 4 months, and I think we'll be ready for it. And there will be other opportunities. I just don't think this is the right time. After Christmas, in the spring, perhaps March, April, it'll be time, because people will be completely fed up by that time.
Dan?
I think jobs are important. There's been 152,000 full-time jobs created since March, 60,000 in the month of September alone. We have the lowest debt to GDP in the G7. We have the strongest credit rating in the world. And so we have the fiscal firepower to invest more in infrastructure, in defense, while at the same time keeping. I agree. We've got to create jobs, especially for young people.
More taxes? No. And people say,
think-
well, we can tax
That's a
the
valid
rich.
question.
I think we need to find a balance, and people, the cabinet and the prime minister have been putting in the time. They know the files in great detail, and we need to find that balance to create a strong Canada.
What is worth paying more taxes for, in any of your views? Dorothy, if we start with you, is anything worth it, or you're saying that's never the path ideologically? We need to just figure out a different way economically and go to the private sector.
Well, guess
to
who
help?
gets hurt with more taxes? The people who have the least, the least money. And I don't think that's the right way to go. So I think that we have to start looking at how we're spending our money, and first of all, the civil service. And they're talking about we want to cut all the departments by 15%. Well, that's kind of an across-the-board idiocy. That is not going to happen. But we certainly need to reduce the number of civil servants. We've got 3-1 over what we had in 2015.
I want to ask each of you that provocative question, because at the end of the day, the pot of money doesn't change. So what is it worth asking Canadians to pay more tax on to increase to?
Well, that's a hard one to answer as a one-off, because I don't have all the information in front of me, but it's worth paying more for a strong, healthy Canada that has a good position in the world.
Erin?
It's worth having wealthy people pay more for sure, so that kids can eat, so that kids can go to school. That's worth it.
But they already pay more than anybody else. Taxes don't work. We have to open up the opportunities for people to get to invest in our country and to be able to create those jobs. Governments do not do a good job of that.
So this particular moment, everyone in the panel agreeing maybe not the moment to go to the polls, but also everyone agreeing that it's an important budget tomorrow. I pulled out 2 points of agreement in 20 minutes, and the rest will leave.
It's a record.
That's why you're partisan. Okay, thank you for all being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll find out later in the week what happens here. Well, tomorrow, budget comes down. Dan Vandal, former Liberal MP, Erin Selby, former NDP MLA, and Dorothy Dobbie, former Progressive Conservative MP. They are our partisan panel on CBC. Over to you, Manitoba. What do you need in the budget? What do you hope's in the budget? What do you fear is in the budget? 788-3205.